Hi, everyone. This is going to be an episode that I'm going to discuss this recent event where Canada's House Speaker praised a Ukrainian immigrant from the World War II era. And he fought in World War II in Ukraine for, he said, to liberate Ukraine from Russia, which was attacking from the east. And basically anyone who knew that storyline, the parliament speaker should have known that means he's part of the Hitler army, and he never figured that one out. And this gentleman joined in 1943 and joined the Waffen SS, which means he's part of the genocidal unit. The SS were the operators of all the death camps throughout all of Europe, secret little enclaves that they owned the property, and they were basically the processors of the murder of the 6 million Jews. And so he is also implicated now in all those atrocities, and the Jewish people have stepped forward and said, we want to prosecute him. The Jewish people want to prosecute him by extraditing him to Poland, where his crimes were committed. And this is such an excellent example, a object lesson that's from real life of how everyone can make and miss something that is so obvious. The way he was described, everyone who's applauding should have immediately said, wait a minute. Russia was our ally during World War II against the Hitlerites. So that means this guy has to be in the middle of the war. What does he have to be? He's a Hitlerite. He's part of the Hitler army. Instead of being Ukrainians, had a choice. They could either be part of the Russian army to fight the armies of Germany, the Nazis, or you could join them. And this was the group. This guy joined the group where we're fighting the Russians because they're our allies. That's what anybody who had a half a brain in this parliament had to say, whoa, stop applauding, everybody. We're applauding the wrong guy. And they made a big blunder. So if adults in the room at a parliament of Canada can make this kind of blunder, what do you think is the chance that you, my friends, may be making a blunder about something that will eternally determine your destiny, whether you're going to violate the first commandment of God, to have no other God before me, the first commandment. And we're talking about the Trinity doctrine. So I just want to prepare you for this by just seeing how obviously ignorant they were. And you have to ask yourself, was it justifiable ignorance? They didn't know what side the Ukrainian people who stood against Russia, who were they standing with? That's what they're acting like they didn't know who the Ukrainians fighting Russia were standing with. They were standing with the Nazis. You have to choose between Russia and you have to choose between the Nazis. And they chose the Nazis, and they were adamant. And this guy was an SS Waffen officer. So anyway, here's the below there. You'll see the Canadian House Speaker apologizes for praising Ukrainian who fought for the Nazis. BBC News. And his name on the right, you'll see, is Yaroslav Hunka, and he was brought into the audience, into the chambers, and then he's introduced, and a big round of applause is given to him. And I'm going to play some of these clips just to make my point strong that there is a group of people simultaneously all making a historical blunder by not putting two and two together what the speaker described this guy's background as. And what I'm going to say in the end of this video, very briefly at the end, I'm going to say on Judgment Day, it will be similar to the bursted bubble caused by the Canadian Parliament praising and applauding a Canadian immigrant who was an SS Nazi during World War II. It's going to be that kind of burst of a bubble when Jesus Christ reads back to you his own words on who is the only true God. So I'm going to hold that in suspense. So stick to the end for you to hear where that verse is and what Jesus was saying. And it's unequivocal. There is no exception, and I'll explain why. All right, so I hope you learned something, and particularly if you're a Trinitarian, you're on the fence, I hope this will dislodge you and open your mind to reconsider, because your entire destiny depends on whether you make this blunder, obvious blunder, and ignorance of Jesus's words will indeed be the basis for Jesus to declare you lost for eternity. So don't go in that direction. Here we go. First of all, I want to set the historical setting by reading the BBC article. The speaker portion. The Speaker of Canada's House of Commons, Anthony Rota, has apologized for praising a Ukrainian man who served in a Nazi unit during World War II. Yaroslav Hunka, age 98, was sitting in the gallery and got a standing ovation in Parliament after Mr. Rota said he was a hero during a visit by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Canadian Jewish group CIJA said it was, quote, deeply troubled that a former member of a Nazi division that participated in the genocide of Jews had been celebrated. That indeed, this is a SS Galicia unit which was implicated in horrific crimes, as we'll get into later. It said this should never have happened. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was with Mr. Zelensky in Parliament at the time. Mr. Trudeau called the invite deeply embarrassing on Monday, but he did not call for Mr. Rota to resign. Quote, it's extremely upsetting that this happened. The speaker has acknowledged his mistake, blunder, I would have said, has apologized. But this is something that is deeply embarrassing to the Parliament of Canada and by extension to all Canadians. Now listen to this. This is history speaking. Thousands of Ukrainians fought on the German side during the war. Thousands of Ukrainians fought for Hitler. But millions, most more, served in the Soviet Red Army. So at that time, Ukraine is part of Russia. Just so you know, later Khrushchev in the 1950s, a decade later, hand over the entire part of Ukraine from Russia, where Khrushchev had been born in Ukraine, that province, and he said, "I'm going to create a new entity and take it out of the Russian entity and make it its own republic within the Soviet Union of republics." And so, but that didn't happen yet. At this time, Ukrainians only had one choice. You either become a Hitler servant or you serve the Red Army. And the Red Army is allied with the United States. We're supplying Russia tons of weapons to fight the Nazis in Ukraine and also to take it further and into Germany. And this is how we won the war, frankly. If you didn't know, the Battle of the Bulge, we were about to lose the war. Most Americans are never told this until the Russians, we asked them, please accelerate your attack from the east so we can be freed. We're about to be wiped out. The main forces of the United States Army was about to be wiped out in southern Germany. And I know this because my grandpa, he was on my mother's side, was Ukrainian. He was born in Kiev, and he ended up serving as a translator between the Russians, the Ukrainian soldiers in the Russian army, the British, because he could speak English, because by that time he had immigrated to the United States, and he could speak Polish because he had to travel out of Ukraine through Poland, and he learned Polish there, and he lived in Austria, so he knew the Austrian dialect. So he knew all these things, and he was engaged as the translator between all these voices. He and 5 other guys were handling all the intercepts from the Russian and Austrian and Polish speakers who were serving the Nazis and the Ukrainians. So he knew all these languages so that he could give the communications to the Allies, Russian and United States and England, and that's what his whole mission. And he was stationed with a English British force, the 144th, in a portion of Ukraine that was under Russian protection because this force was serving with Russia as our ally. That's what this is why I found this so fascinating, because my grandpa told me this whole story of what he did during World War II. And when he got 2 Purple Hearts, he couldn't do anything but serve as a translator. And that's what he ended up doing. If you're interested in reading up on that, I did an extensive article with all the research and my grandpa's statements and references in an article called Grandpa and the Battle of the Bulge. It's under author background. And you'll find at the very bottom of the page a link. Now, I'm not going to play you the rest of the clip, but it goes on with applause and more compliments and all that kind of stuff. But I want to replay for you where he must have known, if he knew any basic history of World War II, what he just said. He was fighting for independence of Ukraine against Russia during the middle of the war. Can't be anybody but Hitlerites. He doesn't know basic history. And that's what I'm saying. The same issue, what I'm going to show you, if you're a Trinitarian, I'm going to show you a statement by Jesus that is unequivocally clear that this will judge you on Judgment Day, and you will be as embarrassed as this gentleman, the Speaker of the House right there. He even cites the history that should tell anybody that this guy is not on our side. He's on the Nazi side. So let's play that part of the clip over again.
Here in the chamber today, Ukrainian Canadian world veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians.
And that's why, if you look at the bottom of this page from the BBC, this is their article describing the event. They said thousands of Ukrainians fought on the German side during the war. If they weren't fighting for the Germans, the Nazis, their only choice was, because they were citizens of Russia, right? There was no separate Ukraine at the time. Millions more serving the Soviet army. There's only one of two ways it can go. So if he's fighting against Russia, he's fighting for the Nazis. That had to be something that would process in anyone's brain if they had half a brain or thought about it. And that's what I'm trying to say. It was so obvious. How could he miss it? And then he said it, and then all these people applaud, not putting their brains two and two together. See, this is its groupthink. And that's what I also want to say. Trinitarianism only survived as groupthink, and because people were killed and punished and exiled and expropriated of their property if they went against the Trinity. So the Trinity didn't rely upon persuasion or a verse from the Bible, because actually it contradicts Jesus's words in the Bible, which we're going to get to at the end. That is as extremely as clear as this fact of history. That bottom paragraph is as clear a fact as any fact that should have made every person in that room say, whoa, pull our hands back. No applause for this guy. He's got to be on the wrong side of history. Okay, and I want to play one more clip from Breaking Points, 2 minutes, and we will learn from them a few more extra details.
And while he was in Canada, Justin Trudeau and the Canadian Parliament decided to honor President Zelensky in a session very much like we had our joint session, where they featured a, quote, Ukrainian freedom fighter. And it turns out that that Ukrainian fighter, who fought in World War II, as they described it, was a literal Nazi. Here's how they described it, though, at the time. Let's take a listen.
Zelensky's speech received at least a dozen standing ovations. There was also one for this man, a 98-year-old Ukrainian Canadian who fought for Ukrainian independence against the Russians during the Second World War.
Fighting for Ukrainian independence against the Russians in the Second World War is certainly one way to say it. The other way to say it, let's put this up there on the screen, our friend Yegor, is it was called the SS Division Galicia, which changed its name to the 1st Ukrainian Division in April of 1945 after already losing the war, the same month that Hitler killed himself. Calling a, quote, 98-year-old SS veteran a Ukrainian veteran is like calling Adolf Eichmann an Argentinian farmer. This is no joke, Crystal. This was straight up, this is not like he was a Wehrmacht soldier. No, straight up Waffen SS, actual Nazi soldier in the Second World War. A division, by the way, the SS Division Galicia, implicated in several like horrific instances during the Second World War, specifically targeting the Polish people, who are very much waking up to this. The fact this is not a bigger scandal in the United States, and really even in Canada, who is only just now waking up to this and took a long time to even acknowledge or even apologize more than 24, 48 hours after this incident, is outrageous. Put this up there on the screen. This is actually from a university professor and historian there. He says, quote, these are the photos that, for those who are watching can see, of the SS Galicia Division veteran who was given standing ovation by the Canadian Parliament. He published these himself of his division in training in Germany, standing in the middle of the first photo, second on the left in the second photo, if we want to go ahead and show that one, and without a helmet near the machine gun in that photo. I mean, one of the things is he volunteered in 1943, okay, in the Ternopil region of Western Ukraine, which means he fought and served in this division at the exact times when it was both commissioned and was implicated in multiple atrocities, as I said, in the region.
Now, before I get to my point about this application to the Trinitarian listeners here, that you want to test your beliefs, and I'm going to help you with that. But I just want to show you socially what's going on in Canada. This is really about the Ukrainian community of SS officers and direct Nazis who were living in Canada. And the group of Canadian Jews, in particular this guy Yasha Levine, have been saying for years, these people have done monuments to their guys, their SS units, and all these things, and you're just ignoring these in Canada as if it's no big deal. And you can't do that. And listen to what he's saying. And this is what they call a watershed moment, where finally the bubble has been burst. And that's what I'm going to try to tell you. The verse I'm going to show you from Jesus should burst your bubble. So let me let you show how this happens, how this impacted. He's saying Canada now has had its bubble burst, and it knows the truth now, and it can no longer deny the Ukrainian Nazi problem inside of Canada. They were allowed to immigrate, claimed they were freedom fighters, and it was never tested. What does that mean? How can you be a freedom fighter during a war where it's either the German Nazis versus the Russians, or you're going to be on one of those sides? And we're allied with Russia at the time. So listen to what Yasha says. It's a short clip.
Could have, the Prime Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland, constantly meet with these Ukrainian groups who are, I mean, they are basically, it's crazy. They're like rebranded logos that they have for themselves. It's like the League of Ukrainian Canadians, for instance, right? Their logo, it has like a maple leaf in the center, and it's kind of this triangle. It is the logo of the OUN, of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, that was led by Stepan Bandera, the one that was basically, he is like the Hitler of Ukraine, basically, like the little Hitler of Ukraine. It is exactly the same, except they just stuck a maple leaf on it, and they changed a couple of letters around. Yeah, and then you have the top politicians in Canada meeting with them, tweeting about it constantly, and it's in the open, and so you have this Canada is just this really an extreme case of this. It's almost it's shocking that this is allowed to go on, and I am very glad that this finally happened. I mean, I think for a lot of us, have been writing about this, have been following this. This is like almost like a cathartic moment, because for the first time, it's actually something's.
Okay, so maybe this will be your cathartic moment if you're a Trinitarian. So I'm going to state the case. Okay, this man's past, that man, the SS Nazi guy, was described in the Canadian Parliament as a World War II fighter against Russia. However, if the Parliament knew basic World War II history, they would have known not to applaud a man who was fighting against Russia at the time Russia was a U.S. ally in World War II against the Nazis. This man could only have been a Nazi army fighter. It turned out he was part of the SS Waffen, a unit dedicated to the final solution to clear lands of Jews so the Aryan race can occupy the soil. And again, most Americans don't understand. The SS operated all the death camps. It was a special unit from Himmler to keep the final solution as secret as possible from the German people, although it was leaking out from here and there. Watch Schindler's List, and you'll see how that progressively became harder and harder to keep a secret. Anyway, what's the Trinity blunder? If not fixed, and I'm not telling you yet, if not fixed before your death, it will be as embarrassing an ignorance of Jesus' words as the Canadian Parliament's ignorance of World War II history. So here's the shocking verse. John 17, 1-3 in King James Version, similar to all the others. It will be a shock to many Trinitarians to hear this, and you don't want to hear this on Judgment Day. If Jesus says, how do you come to this belief that there's three gods and one Godhead? And he's going to ask everybody this same over and over, did you read my words? You claim you believe in me. You claim you think I'm God, yet you ignore what I said. Who is God? Verse 17:1, he's praying to the Father in front of the apostles. These words spake Jesus and lifted up his eyes to heaven and said, Father, the hour is come. Glorify your Son, that your Son may also glorify you. Verse 17:2, as thou hast given him power over all flesh, that he should give eternal life to as many as thou hast given him. Verse 3, and this is life eternal, that they might know you, the only true God. Who is you? Father, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. Who is the only true God? Jesus is going to ask you what he's going to say. What did I say? Who did I say was the only true God? And if you try to forget and claim you didn't hear this, you've heard it now. You cannot backpedal. You've heard it finally. And Jesus said, there is no such thing as any God but the Father. And that means there's no God the Son. There's no God the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is part of God. Jesus is indwelled by the Father. Jesus says that in 13:10. But that doesn't make Jesus no longer who he was. He's a human being indwelled by the Father. That doesn't make him God. That's the problem. There's only one God. And Jesus told you who it is. It's the Father. So on Judgment Day, are you going to have suffered the same blunder in your brain that you found a way to turn off the noise of Jesus' words and just listen to all the noise that, everybody believes in the Trinity, it must be true, or, they know better than I, or, the social pressure, if I refuse the Trinity, I'm afraid I'm going to go to hell if I don't believe in it. But now I see here, this would say I have an excuse. This is not only an excuse, it's the only belief you can accept. So please take time, if you can, to look at some of the other videos on our channel. If you're still in doubt about the Trinity doctrine, just word search into our, you know what? I'll put in a link inside of our description to this video, a URL to all of our videos on the Trinity doctrine. You can pick which videos you want to play, and then you click the URL and it will play. All right. God bless everybody. Take care. Ciao. Bye.
Here in the chamber today, Ukrainian Canadian world veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians